we are live. Welcome back to day two of the Agentic Distribution Summit, where we're getting a first-hand look at how companies and leading CXOs, VCs, and analysts are transforming from manual GTM into agentic distribution. As always, please follow along the conversation in the HSC Slack. And we're super excited to kick things off with the Agentic Flywheel, featuring Chris O'Neill, CEO at Crowdslope and board member at Gap. And this conversation is going to be led by Russell Scherwin, facilitator at Force Management and former CMO at IBM Watson. What a chat. Welcome to the show. How are you doing?
Doing great. Thank you so much. How are you doing?
Super excited for this. And yeah, for our community, please ask questions. We'll leave 5-minute Q&A in the end of this conversation. And yeah, let's dive in. Russell.
So, thanks so much, Julia. Chris, it is such a pleasure to have you here with us, and great to meet you as well. So let's just get started. Both of us have been through a couple of hype cycles, and we know that sometimes meanings can get distorted. Why don't you start by explaining to the audience what an AI agent is and how they collaborate with us?
Sure, Russell. Yeah, I've been through my fair share of hype cycles, from dot-com busts to mortgage meltdowns to now what I think is probably the largest seismic shift in AI. I am unapologetic about it being real, probably overhyped in the short term and underhyped in the long term. But to your question, agents are essentially fueled by data of all sorts. The best type are first-party data for companies because it provides context. Agents are masters at taking context and completing task-specific workflows or steps in the task-specific workflows. The agents have autonomy in that they can have agency, that's hence the name, and then they can work together in what I sometimes refer to as agent swarms to complete those workflows. So at the heart of it, it's really taking context, a whole bunch of data, task-specific algorithms to complete either discrete steps or whole workflows together.
Love it. How do you see them? How do you see them working with us? And how have you seen them working with us?
Yeah, the way I think of agents is really alongside. So there's a lot of hype, of course, and a lot of headlines written about how agents are going to take over everything. And there's some degree of truth, of course, in that. Large portions of jobs will simply go away, or almost every job will be reinvented in some meaningful way. So I think of agents much the same as you would like having an infinite number of interns that you'd hire and you integrate into a specific workflow, right? So if we step back and think about what has fueled step function changes in artificial intelligence, whether that's going back to things like AlphaGo, Google's famous leap forward, whether it's self-driving cars, or whether it's even Billy Beane using new techniques to reinvent how baseball and sports management was done. There are really 3 or 4 ingredients. It's a step function improvement in data. It's a step function improvement in task-specific algorithms that says you do this, then this, then this, and the ability to test that. That's an important part to say, hey, are the agents actually doing the task-specific things right? And then the last ingredient is courage, and that's really why I think it's so important for leaders to gain facility and fluency in AI, and then have the courage to say, there's just simply a better way to do this, knowing that it's not going to be perfect. The road's going to be twisty. It's going to be bumpy, but that's really how all major breakthroughs have been fueled, with a combination of those 3 things. So agents have a starring role in all elements of that.
Love that. I love that, because I took 2 things away from that answer I want to probe a bit deeper into, but I want to make sure I got that right first. First of all, what a great quote, or terrifying quote for some of the MBA students in my class. Agents are an infinite number of interns. I'll put that one to the side for now. But the other key one is there's 4 layers. There's the data layer, there's the workflow or application layer, there's then testing on top of that, and then the courage to make it all work. And so when I think about that, that's not too different than let's say an operational stack might have looked in the 90s, which is you got your data tier, you have your application tier, and humans on top of it optimize the combination of humans and workflow on top of hopefully good data. We'll get to that in a second too.
Yeah.
And then have the courage to drive outcomes through it. So let me throw this question at you. Management could be said it's about orchestrating good intent. We all have good intent, but orchestrating outcomes is about driving workflows and behaviors that consists of team members to get there. Let's hit on capacity planning, or let's hit on orchestrating outcomes. First of all, what's the new ceiling? Let's start here. What's the new ceiling in positive business outcomes that can be created as we infuse agents into our workflows?
Yeah, and that's the exciting part, Russell. It's really driving outcomes, and through the lens of marketing, it's always been a little elusive, right? It's like the famous quote that says like, half my marketing works, but I just don't know which half. And so, what I think we're chipping away at is the ability to have greater precision in outcomes. I'm a big believer in why this is so exciting is the velocity that it enables. And I'll unpack the term velocity because it sometimes gets interchanged, often gets interchanged with the notion of speed. But velocity is a term from physics. It's basically speed times direction, or direction times speed, right? And often companies and individuals even overlook that important point, meaning you have to be clear about where you're going. You also have to be equally clear as to what success looks like and what problems you're actually solving, right? This is not about just taking a new technology and trying to apply it everywhere. And that's really one of the things which I think fuels hype cycles in the wrong direction, right? It's a technology in search of problems. And I think this is so real in that if you are clear that your job as a company, among many things, is to basically clearly identify a problem that matters for a group of customers and then find a way to solve it. Not just launch a feature, but actually solve that problem. And the pace with which we're able to do that now by working backwards from customer insights. Artificial intelligence agents have a fundamental role to basically not just scour the web, but to go everywhere inside your customer, inside your internal data sets. And many companies are doing that as well as we used to do with just Google. They're gathering information from inside lots of disparate systems. And there's the rise of data clouds, the Snowflakes and the Databricks and Google and Azure, et cetera. Now, that is really fueling this because it's about gathering that information, right? Allowing you to get from insight to impact faster, right? Compressing that cycle. Right now it's too manual, it's too slow, and these tools and data sets are fragmented all over the organization. This is a path to a better way in that getting clear on where you're going, the direction, and then really doing everything in your power to really work customer back to make sure that you're reducing the time and the space between that idea, that insight, and then the impact that you can ultimately drive. That's what the great companies are doing, or at least the ones that are separating the best from the rest, so to speak. So it's an exciting time, and I'm happy to drill into some specific examples if you're interested.
Yeah, I do want to go there. I want to just, again, bring up a really cool quote that I think everyone should be writing down, which is, it's speed, it's velocity, not speed. It's kind of like I told my kid last night, my 14-year-old, got to work hard. You don't work hard unless you're also working smart, right? There needs to be intentionality to it. Let's talk about, we're talking about driving greater outcomes. And I know Growth Loop, you got some great name brands on your website.
Yeah.
Talk to some outcomes. At the end of the day, for marketing, I just want to drive more consumers into my funnel and I want to convert more of them. That, I don't think Agentic or the buzzword of the day is going to change that. But talk about some of the outcomes you're seeing this new technology in the mix driving.
Yeah, so if you think about like where the company started was really inside of Google. And for a very innovative company, which Google clearly is, we felt that the way in which marketing was supporting business outcomes was a little bit convoluted. And not because people weren't clear on what success looked like or even had good or bad intent. Like it wasn't that at all. It was that there was really these broken workflows and siloed information all over the place. So if you're trying to drive business outcome for a specific business line at Google, right? The marketing person, the product marketing person had to go over to the data team and line up and queue up their request alongside all the other things going to that data team. And then it would say, oh, is this like a little Goldilocks? I mean, it's too big, too small, not really relevant to move the needle. Just to identify the first step, which is to say who might be amenable to some ideas that we have to grow the business or grow this category or this product in this case. And that literally took days and weeks, and sometimes in some organizations months. So it starts with reducing the back and forth by basically saying, hey, let's put the data in an accessible spot. In this case, it was Google BigQuery. And then let's allow marketers in this case to self-serve. Okay, what's the problem that's being solved there? And it goes from basically weeks and months in some cases just to define an audience, who you should be speaking to, and what you forget about for a minute just what you're going to offer them, but just to say, hey, how do we size? So first and foremost, it's dramatic efficiency from basically what used to take weeks and months with an agent trained upon the data. That happens instantly while you're sleeping. You wake up and you've got 10 ideas, right? That aren't just pulled from the air. They are informed from the market, from your competitors, and from your actual data and actual previous results to say, here are 8 ideas, 10 ideas, whatever it is, that we think you should consider running. Now, the human comes in and says, okay, which of these, knowing what I know about our customers and what we're trying to accomplish, which ones might be the most amenable to testing? So that's one, is just saving so much time, right? Like from basically weeks and months to basically hours and minutes and even seconds. That's one. The other notion is, and almost all of our customers are doing some version of that, right? Whether it's all the baseball teams that we have, the professional sports teams we're so lucky to have, whether that's Google, whether that's more recently Costco and Albertsons, and we're so fortunate to have a lot of these big brand names that have trusted us to be a partner. But where it gets even more interesting is to say, okay, great, what are we going to offer in what channels and when, right? So you start to think about all the different surface areas of interactions with your customers. And this is when it becomes hard, right? Because you got to basically figure out what are the surface areas, right? Email, paid ads, the social, et cetera, like literally infinite number of channels, it seems like. And how do you do it with consistency so that you can basically do two things, right? You can start to optimize the lift of what types of offers work in which channels, and then you feed that back into the cloud to understand what actually worked. And you do that increasingly with personalized messaging, right? That's been the holy grail for a long time. Right message, right channel to the right person with the right offer. That's been elusive for all the reasons we started to talk about and more. But basically you orchestrate across all these channels, very complex channels, and you integrate all the intelligence of a company. You have these data science teams that are working away doing a fantastic job. They know propensity to purchase something. They know price elasticity, but all these things live in the ether. So it's about stitching those in or weaving those into an orchestrated journey that's personalized to that person. And how is it personalized? Because it's the first party information that a brand has on their customers. And that's the gold mine. That's the gold mine that has not been properly harnessed, or at least fully harnessed, until now. So that's a bit of a tour of the things and the specific things that are allowed. So it's faster and less fragmented workflows. And then it's lift by basically being much more intelligent about which channels and which offers are working so that you can double down on the ones that are, and then you can discard the things that were failed experiments. So I'll stop there. I just said a bunch of things, Russell. I want to allow catch my breath, and you can challenge any of that or take us in a different direction.
I tell you what, let's do this. I love what you said. You reminded me of a story, gosh, going back almost 6 years right now, that I'll tell you because I feel like you've given me so much. And then we'll pivot into how we do this at scale. So that's kind of where the story is going to take us. The story I'll tell you is very similar when the topic of personalization. This goes back when I was leading the e-commerce business at IBM. We had this customer, Carhartt, which I'm sure you've seen plenty of their stuff.
Carhartt. I know Carhartt very well. Yes.
Do you remember the movie Interstellar?
I didn't watch it, but I've heard of it. Yeah. Tell me more.
Well, it's a must watch. I'll tell you it's a must watch. But in the movie, Matthew McConaughey was one of the stars. And for the vast majority of the movie, he was wearing a Carhartt jacket. And at the time, Carhartt was a legacy commerce customer of ours. We own their e-commerce platform. And imagine what happens on Carhartt's site and their e-commerce sales. When Matthew McConaughey, and by the way, this was a record-grossing opening weekend. What do you think happened to revenues on Carhartt's site that weekend?
Well, did the sites stay up? That's my first question.
The site did stay up.
IBM did a good job. I mean, it would go basically straight up, right? It'd be exponential growth.
So here's what happened. The site traffic went up, but that's a vanity metric, as we know. Revenue barely blipped the needle because that jacket was buried like 11 pages deep. And this was back before we were scaling AI, but we started applying it. So what we did is we applied what would today be called an agent to look at things that are happening. What kind of anomalies are happening? Why is everyone searching Matthew McConaughey? That would have alerted someone over the weekend to go move that from page 11 up to the forefront and create a hero graphic. And so when I heard your story, it went back to that. But back then, we weren't doing that at scale. When I look at your organization, you're making these tools available not to superhumans, but to an everyday human like myself. Talk about, now I'm the CMO at Carhartt, I'm the CMO at Gap, which I know is one of your portfolio companies, or it's a company on the board of. What questions should the board be asking a CMO, and what questions should the CMO today be asking their teams to make sure this technology which can be used at scale, is getting harnessed?
Yeah, I mean it's a great example, and maybe we can come back to the role that agents play on the other side. So this is a more future looking, but I do believe there'll be agents on both sides of a transaction, so to speak. So we can put a pin in that and come back. But to your question with CMOs, like I think the very first question as a board or senior level person in the company should be asking is very specifically where, with specific examples, will this show up as a benefit on your profit and loss statement? Not hand wavy, we're going to experiment our way into it. No, it's going to move this metric, which will drive top line sales because we'll be able to do X more experiments, and we'll be able to do it with Y less humans in the loop, or whatever. Like there's different variants of where it shows up. But number one is be very specific about where it's going to be. Secondly is around AI fluency, right? How and where are we using AI, and how and where are we investing in our teams at all levels? By the way, all the way up to a board, all the way down to frontline employees. How and where are we investing in AI fluency, and being very specific about this? Not just like, hey, we're using AI. No, it has to be like similar to how a job ladder is treated, right? And this is something we're experimenting with. And I know Zapier's here, and I drew great inspiration from Zapier and my friends at Shopify, who really have written a memo. So they talk about from a memo to a movement. So we write a really popular memo, but really it boils down to the following: not just hand wavy on AI, but being very specific by function and by role. What are the expectations for the basics of using AI all the way up to mastery? And then not only setting that expectation, but enforcing it. To say this is a part of doing your job. And if you're not comfortable embracing AI to do your job, then that's a problem. And you might not be working here if you can't get behind it. And then the other part is really celebrating that stuff. So really surfacing examples, big and small, and especially the small, that say, hey, here's how we're using AI to drive more meaningful work and more meaningful outcomes. So I'd say starts with the outcomes, right? How can you trace it all the way back? How can you make your CMO become BFFs with your CFO to say, look, this is how and where we're driving quantifiable impact on the top and or bottom line, and how are you investing in your teams to drive AI fluency? And the last area I'd say is really around data, right? You don't have AI without data, right? You do not have a great strategy for AI without robust semantic layer of data, investing in the hygiene, investing in governance and protection. Like that's the part that is not sexy at all, but it's fundamental to basically driving, because agents without context are useless, right? They thrive off of context. They need to understand the problem. They need to understand what's worked in the past. It's similar to any other role. You need to provide clarity. What is that agent being asked to do? How are they doing against that? And how are you holding that agent accountable to the tasks that you're setting them out to do? And none of that's possible without robust data, clear, fresh, comprehensive, and accurate data That's the least sexy part, but in many ways foundational. So those, I mean, I could go on, but those, if I had to boil it down to just three, it would be results orientation, AI fluency, and then real crisp data strategy to support it all.
Play that back because if I'm thinking about some of the companies that I sit on boards of, what I'd be taking away right now is, are you talking to your CMOs and all your C-level executives about how the technology is driving outcomes and results? That's number one.
Yeah.
Number
Yes.
two is you're talking how are you enabling your teams and using it. But the key thing you said there, Chris, is with specificity. How are you specifically infusing it into your operation, and how are you measuring it, which is another key piece. You said data, but you also said something that I want to highlight as well, which is how are you celebrating? I used to, on my sales teams, have the most embarrassing call of the week award because I wanted to drive cold calls. In other words, you celebrate to ensure that you're driving the behaviors, and by celebrating the victories, you're infusing it into the culture, which needs to be top of mind. You also said something, Chris, which is a little intriguing, which is holding agents accountable. Well, isn't that the job of a manager, to hold people accountable? Bring those two, perhaps opposing or not opposing thoughts together around agents or just accountability in general in an era where you have humans and robots teaming up.
Well, so I'll try to thread a couple of things together here, or connect a few dots. And it's the notion that I believe even individual contributors are now managers, right? If they think about it on the following plane, that you're going to be managing agents, right? And it's really powerful to think about what makes a manager or even a leader successful and how that might apply to an agent. At the simplest level, I think a manager is really clear about the following, right? They say, hey, what are you trying to accomplish, right? Remember back to that direction thing, like what are the tasks which would be decomposed to lead to that direction becoming possible? And then you're saying what's expected of that person, or in this case, an agent. What are you expecting them to do? What's the task or the project you're expecting them to do? So you're setting clear expectations. And then you don't just set it and forget it, right? You actually are engaged in the details and you give feedback to say, how are you doing against that task, right? What things are going well. Let's celebrate the things are going well. And what things are, you're off the mark. So you can do less of that and more of the former. So, and then, yeah, you do hold people to account if they're, you celebrate them in the end. So I think there's a surprising parallel there between what makes a great manager and what makes a great manager of people or agents. It's the same stuff. And the other thing you're pointing out, like, I'll tell a quick story. So I was leading a turnaround of Evernote, this note-taking application, just a pioneer, great company, amazing team, had lost our way a little bit. And there was a nervousness to take risk. And I was working with Kim Scott, the woman who wrote Radical Candor and many other books. She's a friend, former colleague, and she was my coach at the time. And I was like, Kim, like, how do we get people to celebrate failure? It's a little bit, or at least to be less worried about making mistakes, right? And it's natural to not want to make mistakes, but like, how do you normalize it and celebrate it so you just like don't make the same ones, but you actually are okay making it. So we came up with this thing. She had this thing called Whoops the Monkey. We adapted it to an elephant because it was our brand. But it was basically, like you said, every week we celebrated people who actually made a mistake, right? Like took a risk and they learned something. And that's a really powerful thing here because look, while we're all excited about AI's potential, and rightfully so, right? This is happening at a pace and at a slope that I've never seen before in my career. It's going to lead to mistakes. The best teams, whether it's on the product and engineering side or the go-to-market side, are going to make mistakes about half the time. They just are. If you're shooting for something bold, you're going to just fall short about half the time. So I take that as a given. But the teams that are going to separate themselves from the rest are the ones that actually recover from that quickly. Say, take the things that work well and then discard the things that don't. And they compound a whole loop or workflow faster than others. So to your point about, yes, results, to your point about AI fluency, and the point about investing in data to fuel it all with insights and context, it's really about velocity, back to my point. It's about moving with high velocity so that you learn a little bit. And, it's not about big bang, silver bullet stuff. It's about, did we move a little bit of friction out of the way? Did we improve conversion by a small little bit in this channel, etc. Right? Those little things compound. So that's the game, I believe, and that's the game of, I think, leadership, and then the surprising parallel across humans and agents at the managerial level.
Love that, Chris. And it really brings home the core message for Growth Loop, which I'll be honest, the first time I looked at it, I'm like, okay, that's neat. That's nice. But hearing the meaning, which is, one of my first CEOs I worked for said, hey, Russell, I need you to waste half of your marketing budget, which is very similar to what you just said, which is you got to be willing to make mistakes, but compound that word again with a little bit of vulnerability, which is, hey, let's fail fast, let's fail forward, and let's celebrate the wins and the smart losses that we're learning from. The velocity is going to allow customers to compound the wins and quickly eliminate the losses and get to that competitive edge. And I love the way you frame it. The other thing I love that I want to pull out for the audience is when you're managing and holding AI accountable, you said the process is set the expectations, engage in the details, give feedback, and hold to the account, and then repeat. It's another leader once told me when I was getting into leadership, Russell, it's not about having the answers. It's about understanding and being an expert and asking the questions, which is kind of a way of saying be a great prompt engineer. We got 2 minutes left. Can I give you 2 quick hits?
Go for it.
All right, the first one. So one of my side gigs as part of this sabbatical is I'm teaching an MBA class at UGA, and I'm going to guess we got a couple of my students listening. What do you say to new folks or to students, post-grad, undergrad, who are graduating and are looking for jobs right now and read all the press about, AI is going to eat us for lunch and all that stuff? What do you say to folks coming up into the world?
Yeah, be so good they can't ignore you. It's a line from Steve Martin, and I think it's the best career advice you have. And there's not a company that I'm aware of on this planet right now that isn't curious about AI, and or wants to hire people who have superpowers in AI. Your students, I have a 19-year-old son and a 17-year-old daughter, and I'm working with my son on that very question. And he loves photography. So I said to him, Jack, would you like to vibe code a photography website? Right? And he's like, Dad, what the hell is that? You like tech guy, like what does that even mean? So he's in the process of vibe coding a website. And it's really the advice I would give is like, whether it's for photography or a website or whatever, experiment with these things, right? There's never before been so much knowledge and tooling at our disposal. So become insanely good at using these tools in big ways and small ways. So in many ways, I know the headlines are in front of our face, and there's some realness to it, right? There's like, companies are going to always try to be as efficient as they can, but I'm of the belief that those who become super fluent and become so good that the people cannot ignore them around this stuff will not only get hired, but they'll thrive.
Couldn't agree more. And I see we're at time. Great ending words. Make yourself indispensable. That is an economy-proof philosophy. Julia, appreciate you having myself and Chris. Chris, thanks so much for taking a half hour of your day to have this great dialogue. Julia, it's back to you,
Russell.
Phenomenal panel. Thank you so much, Chris and Russell. And lastly, how can our community support you? Chris, let's start.
I'm sorry, Julia, can you repeat that?
How can our community support you? Yeah, where should our people go?
Oh, you can visit our website. You can track me down on LinkedIn. I always love to hear from folks. So share examples, share challenges. I love to be a small part of this community, and it's an honor to do so. Thanks for having me today.
Thanks so much, Russell. How about you?
Oh gosh, I just while I'm on a sabbatical trying to be a better dad, I just love the opportunities to engage in conversations that get the cobwebs out of my brain. So I appreciate you having me, Julia.
Thank you.